Okay, so here we have After Effects. It looks a lot like some of the other Adobe stuff. Obviously, same people made it. We've got our toolbar up here, although you won't use too many of these tools actually. You do most of your asset creation in something like Photoshop, and then you bring it into After Effects. Middle part right here is your work area. In this program, it's called a composition. In other programs, it might be called a canvas or a scene or something like that. Timeline is down here with a layers section over here. We'll get into that later. And this project panel is actually quite important because this is where all the stuff you bring in shows up in After Effects. Now, and right now we're in a project, right? It's called an After Effects project. That's why it's .aep. Again, native only to this particular software. But if we want to have some sort of work area, we can actually, if we were in Photoshop, it'd be File, New, and then you make a new image. Here we can have lots of different things inside one project though. So it's composition, new composition. Now we're just going to go with whatever's here right now because we're not really going to work with it. There's a lot of different settings. If you were going to start from scratch, I do recommend using one of these presets. HDTV 1080-24, that's a pretty good one to start with because it's a standard size of pixels, right? Your regular widescreen TV is this setting. All the other settings are correct. The only settings you really have to worry about are the comp name, right? You want to name it after the project you're working on. And the duration. The duration is frames, seconds, minutes, hours. So this one's going to be 30 seconds. No big deal. We're not going to use it anyways. And you can see once I create something that this actually kind of changes the look of the software, right? So now things are lit up. You can see the actual workspace is this black section, and then the gray is sort of the artboard where things can kind of hang off and animate off the screen, stuff like that. We've got now a time marker where we can actually slide across time. You got your display right there for where you are in time in terms of seconds and frames. But when it comes to After Effects, we're usually importing stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and do File, Import. And even if you're importing multiple files, just go File. And where did I put it? I put that in my desktop. Here we go. In class project folder. Now this is the same stuff that we actually used in class for Premiere. And so I'm just going to bring the whole folder in. Say import folder. Takes a second. And you're going to see that it has all the same stuff that we had before. So that works out kind of nicely. So once you get organized, you have all your stills of your photographs here, you have all your audio here, whatever it is you're bringing in. You don't have to worry about resorting things. They're all going to still be in here, right? So that same band footage we used in class is in here. But one of the great things about After Effects is that, when you guys are working on a larger project that has multiple parts to it, you need to pick one size and frame rate of video to stick with for the whole time. So a lot of you might record some video footage of areas, your work area, spaces, things like that. And when you do that, it's going to come in with its own settings. So what you can do in After Effects and in Premiere, because we did this in Premiere, you did right click, create sequence from clip. Here, you just right click, new comp from selection. So it's the same thing as before, it's just called a composition instead of a sequence. We do that. It even names it after the footage. I may want to change that later. But we can see here, now we can scrub through the footage. Where's my chart? There he is. And it's now all the right frame rate, aspect ratio, pixel size, all that jazz is the same as the video footage. And then you can build off of that with your stills and things like that, but they will have the same settings. Now, one thing that's different about After Effects from Premiere is that you can't just add clips after this, right? You can see my time marker really can't go beyond that. I cannot zoom out like I'm already all zoomed out on the timeline. There is a finite length to this. You have to purposely go into the settings for the composition and make it longer. So I go composition, composition settings. And I said before that there's two different things we'd want to do. Maybe name it. band comp. And then change the time. So like instead of 20 frames, 15 seconds, I might say 30 seconds. And I may even get rid of the 20 frames. I have to put in 0. Don't leave any blank spaces. It gets really weird and does strange things. You do see this right here. This start time code is something crazy, 20 hours, 36 minutes. What's happening is sometimes, depending on what your settings are for your footage, you might have time code start times, meaning the video camera keeps track of where it is on the tape. Even though you press start and stop on, on the record button on the camera, it keeps track of where you were. This is for editing purposes and professional settings. They need to know exact time codes. That's why the little clapper boards, right? That's all for lining things up. Now, you probably won't have to worry about that, but it can kind of make the timeline look weird, right? I'm at 22 frames and 8 or 22 seconds and 8 frames. That's bizarre. I can't make heads or tails of that. So I reset this all to 0. And when I go back, now my timeline 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. This makes a lot more sense than it did before. All right. Now, I still can't see past the edge of this clip. There is time after the end of this clip. I know it, but I can't see past it. Why? Well, I'm zoomed into this part of the timeline. Even though I extended it, it's kind of, off the screen over here. Above the seconds is this right here. And I can click it, and I can drag, and now I have all my empty space with which to bring in, say, the champagne glasses. Now you'll notice this looks different. They didn't go on the same line. They automatically went to a different one. In Premiere and Audition, when we get there, you have tracks. A track is sort of a section that can have multiple items sequentially in them. These are not tracks in After Effects. These are layers. These are layers just like Photoshop. If I put champagne layer underneath band layer, I would be able to make one of these transparent so you can see through it to the other one, which we'll get to in just a second. But so understand that each of these things that you put in there, whatever you put in there, they are layers, and each one has their own settings. I can turn sound on and off for each layer. I can turn visuals on and off for each layer. I can lock each layer. A lot of different settings. We're not going to get into these, but just understand that each is its own separate thing. There's not going to be any settings for layers or assets up here. Only for tools, if that applies, and it rarely does. All right, but how to deal with those properties, right? I might not need to scale things, change the transparency, move them around, and animation, of course, which is why we're in here. So I'm going to twirl this down, little caret thing right here, right? Twirl it down, and then you'll see there's transform and there's audio. Audio, if I twirl that down, you can actually see if I turn the audio on, there's a waveform. There's some very basic sound editing you can do in After Effects. It is not the best place for it, other than fading down to nothing. But it is possible. Transform is all your visual transforms, right, with the whole video. And this is going to be our bread and butter. This is where we're going to change things, right? So, for example, I said I could change the opacity. We're going to start from the bottom. I can go, bring it down to 0, or bring it halfway up, right? So now I can see through the band layer to the champagne. So this is how it functions like layers, just like Photoshop. The only difference is it's video, so it has time to it, right? Let's see. So that's opacity. I'm going to bring that back up. Rotation, pretty self-explanatory. Scale, again, functions much like you would think. This little chain link means constrains proportions, so you can't squash things, so you don't have to hold down shift or anything. You just, keep that link there. Position, which I'm just clicking up here and moving, and the numbers change down here, but they're related. The only different one that we haven't worked with much before, a little bit, tiny bit in Flash, is the anchor point. The anchor point is what After Effects considers the center of the piece. No matter where the anchor point is on the piece, that's where it goes from when it scales it. That's where it considers the position to be coming from, right? Not the top corners or anything, this piece. So what if you want to rotate from the corner? Like have it swing around. What if you want to have it scale out from the corner? This anchor point affects everything except the opacity. So how to change it? Well, we could change it in here, except, see? If I change these numbers here, it doesn't adjust the position to compensate. And so things move. And it's very unintuitive. We don't like that. We want to be able to just take this and drag it somewhere. This is one of the only times you would use a different tool in After Effects. This pan tool right here, it's called pan behind tool. They say parentheses anchor point because that's the only thing anyone ever uses it for. You can take the anchor point, pick it up, and drag it here. All right. Now, you'll see when I do that, watch down here, these numbers. It's changing both. It's kind of a smart tool. It's like, oh, you want to, change the anchor point, but leave this image precisely where it is. So we're going to let you do that. And it adjusts what the position numbers need to be to keep this where it is. I'm going to go back to my selection tool because you can't do a lot of stuff with the pan behind tool. Alright, so I move the anchor point, which means now it rotates around there. And it'll scale from there. Ooh. All right. Now you'll notice I'm only ever like moving the timeline. I'm not I'm not playing this. It's because if I do, I think my video capture of this will crash. So I can't. There's a couple things I can't show you. All right. So these are your properties or options for this particular layer that you can change. If you wanted to change them for the, champagne layer, you have to twirl that down and twirl that down, and you get all of the attributes for this layer. And any layer you put in is going to have those attributes. Doesn't matter if it's a still or a video or no, audio won't have those attributes because audio is just sound. But anything that's visual, text, shapes, stuff you've imported from Photoshop. All right, all that. But how to animate? That's why we're here. We want to, get stuff moving. So I want to have this come out from the corner. It's kind of like a really cheesy transition for video, but it's a wedding video, so it works. I've already moved my anchor point up to the corner here. Oh, wait, no. There it is. All right, move my anchor point up to the corner. I need to have this scale change over time. In order to activate that, there's a little circle thing right next to the word scale. It's called a stopwatch. And you can see here it's called the time vary stopwatch. Toggle ability of property to change over time. That's a fancy way of saying make something animate. You click it, you only click it once. You click it once, and anytime you change something, it will auto key. It will automatically put a key where you want something. So we're at the beginning. Okay. I change the scale to 0. I go forward a second-ish. And I put scale to 100. And I'm not going to play it, but I can scrub through it. Ooh, and it actually looks pretty trippy because the video, like you can see the cameras. I can't even do that. I'm going to get motion sick. But you can see it automatically keyed this. I didn't have to hit the stop watch again. All right. And then again, if I want this to fade to black at the end, well, first of all, that's terrible. Like, who wants that footage, right? I'm going to go to the point where I want it to stop, like, somewhere around there. And I hover over the edge, and you see your cursor changes, and you just drag this. And it shows you, like, hey, there's all this other footage. Are you sure you don't want to use it? And you're like, yes, because that footage is terrible, and why would I want to use it? There we go. Trim even more of that back. So that's part of what you can do. And it's not going to automatically snap to that time marker. You have to hold down Shift and then drag it, and it will start to snap. So it's the opposite of Premiere. Premiere auto snaps. This does not. But holding down Shift will toggle auto snapping. Same with this. If I want this to line up with the edge of the footage, it's easier if I just hold down Shift, and it'll. Whoop, there we go. But I don't want it to do that. I want it to stay there. Bring this back up. Now, if I want this to fade to black, I don't need to add an effect onto it. I can just change the transparency because the background is black. So again, I toggle animation once. I turn it on. And I want it to start at 100, so I'm going to keep it there. And then I'm going to go forward several frames. Whoop. And bring the opacity down to 0. And you can see that there's, if I move the time marker here, there's 2 keys. All right, so we got 2 keys. And now it will slowly fade to black. I wish I could play that. You'll notice that there are certain areas in this bar that are like green, like this is all green. And then these are mostly dark, except for the few spots that I happen to drag the time marker to, and you can see the little green lines are starting to show up. What this is doing is it's showing me what is currently previewed and can be played live. After Effects more than Premiere has a problem with playing things live unless they're pre-rendered. Doesn't make a separate file, it just pre-renders them, meaning it sticks them somewhere temporary folder, cache, RAM, and then it allows you to play back in real time. If they're playing back in real time, you will have something up here that says playback 20 however many frames a second your comp is real time, and the text will be white. If something is wrong and it's not playing back in real time because it needs to render through first, it'll be red. So that's how I can't break it because the recording will stop, but that's how you can know if things are playing back properly or not. The computers we have at the school are very good, so you shouldn't have too much trouble with those. You'd have to add quite a few effects before you would actually start to have problems playing back. If you're at home on your own computer, especially a laptop, and there's not a lot of RAM, that's another story. Alright, so them's the basics of After Effects. In the other video, I am going to show you how what we're doing for our homework.